talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. Okay, before I actually get into today's topic, I'd just like to say that I have a cold, so my voice doesn't sound as good as otherwise normally would. Just want to let you know that. Okay, so over a year ago, I did a Dreamworks ranking. Of course, I didn't rank every single Dreamworks movie because I hadn't seen every single one of them. There were about 47 of them when I did that video, and the list was about 26 movies, I think. Now I've seen 30 of them, as opposed to the 49 that exist. Now, when I did that, it was my first year on the channel. I didn't have as much experience, and it was not written. Now, I have a script I wrote. I'm holding it in my hand right now. And this video is also just going to be so massive that it's got to be 2 parts. So, and I know you might ask, okay, so even if you do have some new opinions, why would you need to rank every Dreamworks movie again? Is it just for the views? Okay, I know these ranking videos do get views, but also, I do like making them, and when I rewatched a bunch of these movies a few months after making that last ranking, my opinion, my ranking had completely shifted. Sure, the movies I'm still positive on. The ones I'm negative on, I'm still negative on, but my list still has changed drastically enough, and there's enough new content I think it's worth making again. So without further ado, let's dive on into number 30. Number 30 is The Boss Baby. What do you want me to say here? This movie's terrible. The plot is stupid, the character moments are weak, and it's just really gross and off-putting. I mean, seriously. Who wants to look at some of the stuff in this movie? Aside from a couple decent jokes here and there, there's that one bit with people dressed up as Elvis or whatever, that's kind of funny. And Steve Buscemi, who voices the villain, he's pretty good too, I guess, because he's just a good actor. This movie's irredeemably awful. It's kind of hard to even say that it's, at least you can get ironic enjoyment out of it. No, it's just bad. I'm genuinely glad this isn't one of those movies where people say, or people have memed it or something, so they end up liking it. Because, look, you can have your own opinion, but this movie is terrible. It's just disgusting. Literally. How it made over $500 million in the box office just amazes me. But this is the only one of the movies on this list that I actively hate. So I'm going to be more positive for the next couple, but they still won't be super positive. Number 29, Penguins and... Whoops. Road to El Dorado. I don't know why I said Penguins. So recently, I watched this movie for the first time in years. I haven't seen it since 2020. I saw it a couple months back. So and when I saw it for the first time, I didn't really like it that much. At all. But rewatching it again, I was really hoping to enjoy it the way a lot of other people do. But what do I think about it? It was just okay. A 6 out of 10. I don't get the hype here. There are things I liked about the movie, sure, but it just felt very unremarkable, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, I like the dynamic between Miguel and Tulio, the two main characters. I think their friendship was well developed. I even like the second act breakup. I know people always rag on those scenes in movies, which I don't. Very few times do they actually frustrate me. I thought it was actually handled pretty well. But the resolution at the end was just way too rushed. They come back together way too quickly. And in general, the whole third act was just too fast. The climax with the ships or whatever is just kind of dull. And the scene with the giant panther robot, whatever that was supposed to be, seriously, what was that? That was much more engaging, but that also wasn't the climax. So it just ends up being that, why does this one scene from earlier have more tension in the climax? But also that gets done with super quickly, and then we move straight into the actual climax, which is also super fast. It's not paced well. I like the villain, though, the whole evil priest guy. I thought the chief, whatever his name was, the big fat guy, I thought he was a decent character. I liked him. But this movie is supposed to be a comedy, and I did not laugh even once. I chuckled a couple times, but I never laughed, which is sad. I was really hoping I'd get at least 1 or 2 good laughs, but nope, not at all. And Dreamworks movies tend to be really funny, as I'll talk about later on, so the fact that this one, that people always talk about how great it is, it's sad that I really did laugh even once, because I was really hoping I would. And, the visuals, they are impressive. This movie is very well animated, duh. But it didn't really blow me away. I've seen way better 2D animated movies. I've seen way better incorporations of 2D and 3D in animated movies. So this just didn't really do anything to impress me, because good as it looks, it's not like I haven't seen the same thing but better multiple times, because I have. From the same studio, no less. I guess there's the music. I like the score. It's done by John Powell and Hans Zimmer, so it's a good score. But people don't really talk about the regular score. They talk about the songs. I didn't really care for the songs. I mean, I liked The Trail We Blaze, but that's it. I didn't really care about It's Tough to Be a God, or the one with Miguel or whatever his name was, like the blonde one singing to the kids, and I didn't care about the best friends song at the end or whatever. Just, I guess the opening credit song El Dorado was fine, but again, it's not like it's something I would ever go back and listen to. Even the one song I did like, I probably would never go back and listen to. The only thing that's really noteworthy to me about this movie is that it just reminds me that some of these early DreamWorks movies weren't really for kids, especially this one. There is no way Shell would be allowed in a DreamWorks movie just a couple years later. And there's the swearing, which doesn't happen that often, but it still happens a couple times. It's a decent movie, but I just don't really care for it. I don't hate it. I don't think it's bad like I used to, but I don't really like it that much either. It's fine. Penguins of Madagascar. I love the Madagascar series, and that will be pretty evident later on this list, although you'll probably have to wait to part 2 for that. Maybe it's in this part. You'll just have to wait and see. Okay, whatever. Unfortunately, I don't think this Penguin spin-off movie is that good. It's nothing more than okay. A 6 out of 10. Which is sad, because, this had the same writers and directors as the Madagascar trilogy, but they just kind of dropped the ball with this one. It has its funny moments. I thought the vending machine joke in the beginning was pretty good. There's some good action scenes, like the whole one with the plane that's all done in one take. That's impressive. And, the villain, the octopus guy, what's his name, Dave? Yeah, he was funny. I liked him. But I just didn't... But those are just little parts, and when you look at the movie overall, I didn't think it was too special, which is sad. I mean, I don't think the Penguins can't hold a movie on their own. I know people might compare them to Mater, and people, they made Mater the main character of Cars 2. People said that Mater was fine in small doses, but as the main character, he's terrible. Now, even though I do actually like Cars 2, I can admit that Mater doesn't really make a good main character, but I do think the Penguins could have held their own movie. I mean, people might say they're too silly, but Madagascar 1 and 2, especially 2, is basically a mockery of movies. It has barely any story, barely anything you're supposed to take seriously. It's just joke after joke after joke, slapstick after slapstick. So I think the Penguins could have had their own movie. I just didn't like the movie they got that much. I really don't like how they try to give an emotional arc for them. Like, they try to give one to Private, when in the previous movies he was just, like, even more of a joke than the other Penguins. Like the whole, because we spent all our money on that, we can't afford Private's community college fund. Now I'll never get to be president. That was the kind of dialogue he had. They're trying to give him this whole character arc about giving up his cuteness to save the other penguins from being turned into weird mutants. It's just, what? That's just weird. And it tries to take it seriously, too. And, if this movie were more like Madagascar 2, which I mentioned earlier, where it just wants to make you laugh and nothing else, I guess, have some good action, too, I think it would be much better. But unfortunately, that's not what it did. There are other things didn't like about it, actually. I didn't really like any of the secret agent guys. I just didn't think they were that funny or memorable. As it stands, Penguins of Madagascar is a decent movie, but it's really nothing special. Time for the 7 out of 10s. And this one is going to be pretty controversial. The Bad Guys. Look, I've said my piece on this movie when the sequel came out. But I'm okay with repeating myself here, because I know more people will probably see this anyway. This is the most 7 out of 10 movie I have ever seen. It's the definition of, it's good, I liked it, but it could have been better. It made me chuckle a lot, but much like Road to El Dorado, I never laughed even once. The visuals are cool, but this is far from being the best looking DreamWorks movie. It's not even close. I mean, one that looked far better came out the same year. The characters range from really good to dull and forgettable. I think Wolf and Snake are great characters. Like, the two leads, so at least the movie has two good leads, but the side characters just don't really match up to them at all. I mean, I love the scene where Snake yells at Wolf and tells him why he hates his birthdays, but how, on my birthday, it just reminds me of how I'm going to be a monster forever. I thought that was a good scene, but the movie doesn't have too many scenes that really were as engaging as that one. Shark, Piranha, and Webbs are just such bland side characters. I get that they aren't the focus or anything, they're not going to be that well developed, which is fine, but what they're given just isn't interesting. Shark is just, he puts on disguises, and not like any of his disguises were actually funny. They weren't really annoying, but I didn't find them funny at all. Piranha was just a bunch of fart jokes, which is not funny. And Webbs is just there, I guess. I didn't really like or dislike her. She just exists. And that's it. That's all they do. And I didn't really like the character of the police chief either. I just found her to be annoying, and she had kind of a weird design. Diane was okay, though. I think she gets better in the sequel. I like her dynamic with Wolf here. But I like the twist that she's the Crimson Paw, but I just didn't really care about her character that much. I liked Marmalade, though. I thought he was a really good twist villain. I know some people say it was really obvious, but, I didn't see it coming. Okay, I did because I read one of the bad guys' books years ago, but if I hadn't seen it, I do think I would have been surprised that he was the villain. Anything else? I guess the villain's plan makes sense. I said that he was a good twist villain, but Marmalade was a good twist villain. Ignoring the twist, I do think his plan still worked. He's not super menacing. I mean, just listen to his voice and look at his design, but I still thought he made for a good threat at the end. I thought he was likable. I also just find it funny that he's one of the few DreamWorks villains who doesn't die, which ends up getting used to the sequel's advantage, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I thought the message and themes were handled well. Because there's other animated movies that are better about a villain trying to become a good guy, but this one's a whole group of villains, so I think that does make it stand out a bit more. But, like I said, I only really cared about Wolf and Snake, so the other three bad guys turning good just wasn't really at all engaging or emotionally satisfying. But my biggest issue with this movie is that it feels so long. It's 1 hour, 40 minutes, but it feels more like it is 2 hours. This is probably the last time I'll ever talk about this film. That is until the third one eventually releases. So that's my thoughts on the bad guys. Time to move on. The Croods at number 26. I've never spoken about this movie even once until now. Haven't even referenced it. I think The Croods is a good movie, but it definitely has some issues. It can be pretty funny. What was the name of... I think his name was Thunk, like the really stupid guy. I thought he was funny. Some of the jokes with Greg are pretty good, but very few of the jokes stand out in my mind, The only one that really does is the grandma character talking about how she used to be a hunter and fell in love with a gatherer. It was the ultimate scandal. I like that bit. But, the characters aren't annoying, but I didn't really care about any of them except for Grug and Guy. I understand they're the only ones... Well, okay, Eep gets a lot of focus, but I didn't really care about her either. Grug's arc of accepting that he has to change his ways to give his family a better life was pretty engaging. Kind of reminds me of How to Train Your Dragon, where he clashes with his child about how his daughter doesn't want to follow Grug's ways, but because she sees that there can be a better way to live their lives, but Grug wants to stick to his old ways because his ways have kept his family alive for probably centuries. That's a good story. That's a good story, I think. But again, I didn't really care that much about Eep, so while I liked the conflict she was in, I only really cared about one of the two characters on the side of that conflict, you know? I'm impressed with Guy's character, though. He's voiced by Ryan Reynolds, and I think Ryan Reynolds has a very annoying voice. Like, whenever I see him on those T-Mobile commercials, like in that movie Free Guy did a couple years ago, I'm just thinking, man, he's so annoying. But, I don't know, I wasn't put off by him at all here, so that's good. He had some of the best scenes in the movie, like the one where he's talking to the crowd when they're stuck in the tar pits. The visuals are pretty nice. They hold up well. Much like with the bad guys, this is definitely not the best looking DreamWorks movie. And you can say, well, it's from 2013, what do you expect? But it's not like animation from 2013 doesn't hold up to today's standards. And there are DreamWorks movies from a couple years before that I think look better than this one, so, you know. Something I do want to talk about, though, is that this was co-directed and co-written by Chris Sanders, who worked with Dean DeBlow as the writers and directors of Lilo and Stitch and a little movie you may have heard of called How to Train Your Dragon. Chris Sanders was also the sole writer and director of The Wild Robot. And it's very evident this is one of his movies. I talked about how it's similar to How to Train Your Dragon with the whole father-child conflict about one wanting to change ways, one not wanting to change ways, All of Chris Sanders' movies are about some kind of familial conflict, usually about parents. And this is definitely good, but it's also my least favorite of the movies that Chris Sanders wrote and directed, unfortunately. I mean, it is worth noting that another guy wrote and directed this movie alongside him named Kirk DeMacchio. I've never heard of him before, and I'm not going to blame him on this movie not being better than it is, but I also kind of want to, because I feel like if Chris Sanders had done this movie himself, it would have been better. But who knows? What do I know about the production of this movie? A good movie, but one I'll probably never see again. I liked it, but I really don't have any interest in seeing this again. I'd rather see The Bad Guys again, and I liked that movie less. Number 25, Mr. Peabody and Sherman. This is a disappointing movie for me. I've never seen the original cartoon that it's based on, but I know that it's based on a Jay Ward cartoon. I love Jay Ward cartoons. So, one of them getting a DreamWorks movie is already something that interests me. But from what I've heard, this is a bit of a misguided adaptation. Not a bad one per se, but not quite on the right track either. It's definitely good, and there are plenty of things I enjoyed, but the first act is pretty strong, like the whole flashback, like Mr. Peabody and Sherman time travel to the French Revolution. Thought that was funny. A lot of the humor throughout the whole movie lands. Or even most of the emotional moments work, The final exchange between Mr. Peabody and Sherman is actually pretty touching, despite how cheesy it is. And, this movie has Patrick Warburton in it, which already gives it points. He's really funny, as one would expect him to be. But the plot of the movie is pretty convoluted it gets really convoluted at the end, and I started to lose interest. I also didn't like Penny at all. I thought she was pretty annoying. Sure, she gets less annoying by the end, but I still didn't really care about her. This does have one of the funniest scenes in any DreamWorks movie, though. Granted, that's a pretty tall order, so I don't know if I'd actually call it one of the funniest if I had to rank them all, but just, the part at the end where George Washington and Abraham Lincoln show up and say that they can change the law, and then Bill Clinton shows up next to them and says, I've done worse, which doesn't even make any sense because Bill Clinton is still alive. Why would he even be here? That's just a really hysterical scene, honestly. That totally caught me off guard. I just thought that was hilarious. It's a good movie. I do like Mr. Peabody and Sherman, but it could have been better. If it had better pacing, some better character moments, was maybe a bit more faithful to its source material, I think it could have really gone places. Still, I appreciate what it is. I'd never call it bad. I understand if someone would really like this movie. Now we're getting into the 8 out of 10s, except this one really scratches the 8, just barely gets to that mark. Number 24, Shrek Forever After. Oh, by the way, there are a lot of 8 out of 10s on this list. Probably half these movies are going to end up being 8 out of 10s. Or almost half. So, I didn't like this movie as much on rewatch. Although it could just be, I don't know, maybe I was tired when I watched it. Maybe I just wasn't really getting into it as much. Who knows? Whatever, though. My issue with the movie boils down to one thing, because I only really have one big issue. It feels really long. Granted, it didn't feel long on my first viewing, so again, I might have just been tired or something when I was watching this. I don't know. It's not my favorite DreamWorks movie by a long shot, not even my favorite Shrek movie by a mile, but I still really like it. I just think Shrek's character arc here is really effective and a really perfect way to round out his character's journey, you know? It's kind of like a Shrek version of It's a Wonderful Life, which I find pretty amusing. It's about, Shrek is finally has everything he could ever want. He's got a family, friends, people love and trust him. He's no longer feared as a big, scary ogre, but he just doesn't know how to handle that because he lived by himself for over 20 years, and apparently his dad tried to eat him. Like, it makes sense this guy wouldn't be able to adjust to regular life. I think the way all the other characters are handled is good too. Like when Shrek meets them in the distorted world after he makes his deal with Rumpelstiltskin. Donkey is really funny. I mean, he always is, but there isn't. I like this, but he's not just funny, but this movie does a good job giving me a bit more of an emotional scenes again, like he had in the first movie, where he says, "Here, I've never seen an ogre cry before." It's just a nice scene, you know. I love Puss in Boots in this movie. He's become just a fat cat, and he says, "I may have let myself go a little since retirement, but hanging up my sword was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. I have all the mice I can chase and all the cream I can drink." And then he just looks at a mouse and says, "I'll get him later." Honestly, I think he's probably funnier than Donkey across all these movies. Fiona's pretty interesting here. This is one of the few, I think the subversion of her character is actually done pretty well. When I first heard of this movie before I watched it, I thought the movie was about that Fiona is an ogre during the day and a human at night in this kind of weird twisted world. I don't know why I thought that on first viewing, but I did for some reason. Whatever. I just thought it was something interesting. But I gotta say, hot take, Rumpelstiltskin is my favorite Shrek villain. And I'm not talking about the Puss in Boots movies, don't count, okay? Rumple takes what worked about, Lord Farquaad and Fairy Godmother and rolls them into just one great villain. He's funny and does provide a good threat. He's this short little guy who yells and wants power like Lord Farquaad, but he's also a manipulative genius like Fairy Godmother. I like that he's actually pretty smart, despite being so slimy, for lack of a better term. He kind of reminds me of Snively or Starscream, actually. Huh. Now, this isn't one of the few issues I do have with this movie is that, aside from the pacing, is that it's just not nearly as funny as the first two Shrek movies, which is a shame. Now, I do understand that it's focused more on emotional moments than humor, which that's fine, because they are good emotional moments, like the one where Shrek cries for the first time, or, where he says to Fiona, "I got the chance to fall in love with you all over again." Good scene, Excuse me. Tissue. Okay, but, it's a good movie, I do like some of the scenes in this movie, like the humor, even if it doesn't always land. Regardless of the fact that it doesn't have as many jokes as the first two movies, even the ones that are here just don't hit the same kind of humor caliber the first two did. Still good, though. Aside from the whole jokes with Puss in Boots or with Rumpelstiltskin, I just love that part where Pinocchio's about to make a deal with Rumple to become a real boy, and then he gets pulled away. Or the Do the Roar Kid. Yes, I think that's funny. Okay? And this is just a really good conclusion to Shrek's character and story, It's too bad we're getting a pointless continuation in next year, but we'll get when that movie comes out. We have no idea how it's going to be, so right now I'd rather just focus on what we have instead of being anxious about what we don't have yet, So, good movie. Very good one, but not really as good as some people would say, I think. 23. Kung Fu Panda 3. Kung Fu Panda 3, in my opinion, is just barely worthy of its predecessors. It just barely makes that 8 out of 10 for me. And unfortunately, it's just barely worthy of its predecessors, like I said before. Because it does have plenty of issues, but here's the thing. When it hits, it really hits. The animation and visuals are incredible. It doesn't have any of the best action scenes of the trilogy, but it still has some great ones, like that final battle. I mean, like, just all the different, like all the visuals in Final Battle being the spirit realm with all the yellow and the gold and the flying islands and everything, and the big dragon spirit. Like the battle on the rooftops with the zombies. I also want to know about the final battle. I like that all the characters play a part in helping Poe, despite him still being the one to win the day. I like Poe's arc here, even though it's definitely his weakest character arc in the trilogy. Even though Shifu tells him, you don't even know who you are, because he does. That's what the whole point of the second movie was about. To me, if you look at what the movie is saying on a thematic level, I feel that it's more so talking about what Poe is, not who he is. It's about him learning what it means for him to be a panda. Finally, what does it mean for him to be the dragon warrior? How is he? What defines who and what he is? Is he the son of a panda? A goose? Is he a student? A master? Turns out he's all of them. And that's what makes the Dragon Warrior, after all. There are problems with this movie. I said it has a lot of issues. One of them is definitely all the scenes in the Panda Village. I still think they can be pretty funny, but they do drag on for a bit too long. Still, I like the idea of Poe reconnecting with his roots and learning what it means to be a panda. And I like the scenes with him reconnecting with his biological father. That scene where Lee talks about how great his life was only for him to lose it all is so emotional and very effective. Like him, when he lies to Poe, it makes a ton of sense. And I like how it's resolved quickly, too. One can say that it's resolved too quickly, but not only do I think it works for the pacing, I also just think that it does work overall. It makes sense for Poe to understand why Lee did what he did pretty quickly, and it makes sense for Lee to, just be able to face what he did. Other scenes too, I like that Shifu actually has a decent role here. People say he didn't really do anything after the first movie, and while I do think that's true in Kung Fu Pandas 2 and 4, which, by the way, 4 is not even on this list, I do think here he does actually have a decently substantial role. I just like him teaching Poe, or just telling Poe he needs to learn Chi. And, the whole way that Chi looks in this movie, it's just so well made. Like the scene of Shifu, making the flower grow. From both a directorial and visual standpoint, that scene is just amazing. Whenever I think of Kung Fu Panda 3, that's one of the first scenes I think of. So, you might be saying, but if you're praising it, even if you brought up some complaints, sure, but you're still praising it at a time, wouldn't you want to put the movie higher? You must actually love it. No, I don't love Kung Fu Panda 3. And it's for one big reason. I could get over the Panda Village stuff. I could get over all that. Because at the end of the day, I still liked it. It just could have been a bit better. My problem with this movie is Kai. He is such a lame villain. He has an awesome design and theme song, sure, but his actual character is a complete waste. I think the idea that he was betrayed by Oogway is an interesting one, and I love that his motivation is to destroy Oogway's legacy and take his place as the one remembered in the history books. After all, that is why he gets so mad that nobody can remember him. That's why he's so happy when Poe remembers his name. Oh wait, that's not in the movie though. Not really anyway. All this stuff is basically just implied. It's the subtext. There's so much missed potential with his character. There's so much. He wasn't going to be as interesting as Tai Lung or Shen, which is fine, but he ends up being so bland. My biggest issue with him isn't even his writing. It's J.K. Simmons' vocal performance. He could do a great job voice acting. Just look at when he played Ford in Gravity Falls, but his voice is just way too comedic. And it makes him really hard to take seriously. He's supposed to be this centuries-old kung fu master who's come from the spirit world to collect the chi of all the kung fu masters. but his voice is just impossible for me to take seriously. He sounds like a comedian. And like I said, the writing for him isn't that good, so that doesn't really help him either. I would have cast Kevin Michael Richardson and Keith David to play him. And, just make him a bit more menacing, dive more into his backstory, I think. Or the scene where he destroys the Jade Palace? Shifu says that he destroyed it totally or something, but he just took out a small part of it. It's still a good scene, but I think it would have been better if he just destroyed the Jade Palace in its entirety. But, look, for as many complaints as I do have with Kung Fu Panda 3, it's still a very good movie. I still love the final third act. There's some cool action scenes, funny moments, good animation. I still like Kung Fu Panda 3, flaws and all. It's a good movie. 22. Dog Man. I reviewed this back when it came out. My thoughts are pretty much the same. It's really good. I used to read the Dog Man books all the time, so getting a DreamWorks movie was something I was not only excited for, but also something I had high expectations for. Not just because it's from DreamWorks. I mean, DreamWorks has been known to disappoint people before, inconsistency being their brand and all, but they did a good job adapting Captain Underpants, so I had no reason to think they wouldn't adapt Dog Man well. And after seeing the first and surprisingly only trailer, I thought most movies usually get 2 to 3 trailers these days, but I'm glad this one only got 1. After that first trailer dropped, I was genuinely excited. It was everything I'd wanted of a Dog Man movie. Sure, it looked very simple, but, it's Dog Man. I'm not exactly asking for the Wild Robot or The Incredibles or something, But I was worried, though, when Little Petey was shown on the poster. In my opinion, he ruined the book series. He was just always so annoying. He had some good lines, but overall, most of his lines in the Dog Man books are just him making dumb poop jokes or whatever. He's not funny. But I was surprised when... Okay, I went to see this movie on opening weekend. I had a really good time with it. I love the art style. It looks kind of like claymation, which I think is really unique. Sure, it's not necessarily a style I'd want to see again, but I think it fit this movie. Although, who knows, maybe it's art style, maybe a budget thing, because this is apparently the cheapest movie DreamWorks has ever produced. I think I really enjoyed all the little references to the books, whether they be background gags or lines of dialogue quoted word for word, because there are a couple of those. Like the exchange of, what are dogs most afraid of? Firecrackers? Well, yeah, but dogs are also afraid of vacuum cleaners. Gee, I think firecrackers would have been easier. That's right, that's one of my funniest scenes in the books, and I'm so glad they just took that one for one, basically. But ignoring the jokes, I thought the story of this movie was actually really solid. Dogman is a simple character, but I still thought he's an entertaining and easy one to like. Same goes for the Chief. His little arc of being appreciated is nice. But of course the real star of the show is Petey. Duh. He's basically the main character, which was probably for the best since, Dogman does not speak. It is very simple, almost too simple. Not only is Petey funny, but I think his redemption arc works way better here than it does in the books. Part of where I guess the big reason is that in the books, his redemption arc is in the 3rd book. But you've already had 2 books of him being called the world's most evilest cat and being this over-the-top cliche Saturday morning cartoon supervillain. And I like that. But when you try to take that kind of a character and say he's actually good now, it just doesn't work, because even if he never killed anyone or something, but he was just too much of a villain for me to ever buy in becoming a good guy. But here, where we're introduced to him is also the story where we see him become a good guy. And many elements from later books are incorporated into this movie, and everything just more fleshed out. You combine that with Little Petey not being annoying, it makes regular Petey's character arc actually work. Speaking of Little Petey, I thought he was actually pretty funny. Even the scenes, the more emotional scenes with him, where he's where he's talking to Flippy, who I did not expect to see Flippy in this movie. That was a great surprise. I'm glad that wasn't spoiled, but But I never found Little Petey too sappy or annoying or anything, which is very impressive. So, Dogman, good movie. Really liked it. I didn't like it quite as much on rewatch, but it's still very good, It's Dogman. Number 21, Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Much like with Dogman, I used to read the Captain Underpants books all the time. And I'm happy to say that Dreamworks still succeeded with both Dave Pilkey adaptations, obviously. I've seen this movie called the greatest adaptation of all time, and honestly, it's kind of hard to argue with that. It captures the spirit and tone of the books perfectly, from the art style to the humor. George and Harold are really likable and have a great dynamic. They feel like childhood friends. Mr. Krupp is written as both a mean, angry principal the kids are scared of, but also as just a sad old man. My favorite part, though, is Professor Poopy Pants. He is a top 10 Dreamworks villain, in my opinion. Granted, he barely makes the list, but still. He's just so much fun to watch, and I love his dynamic with Melvin. I also appreciate how well this movie blended various aspects of the first couple books into one movie. Sad as I am that we never got a sequel, I also don't really mind that. Maybe a TV show would have been a better follow-up. Except, that actually does exist, doesn't it? There's a Captain Underpants Netflix cartoon. I've never seen it, though, so I can't really judge it. There are other things about this movie to praise, like the Weird Al song made for the credits, which is just awesome. Too bad they couldn't get him to do a Dogman song, either. It does surprise me that this movie was such a box office bomb, considering how popular the books are. Boss Baby came out the same year, and somehow made more than 3 times as much as Captain Underpants. What? Because again, these movies are these books were really popular. This movie is pretty well received, so it's a shame that it really ends up being more of a cult classic than something that actually became really successful. Number 20, The Bad Guys 2. I would recommend checking out my full review I did when this movie released, but I'm happy to talk about it again. Bad Guys 2 was so good. Everything about the original was improved. To start off, my biggest issue with the first film, the pacing, has gone from feeling incredibly slow to fast and efficient. Not rushed, efficient. This is the longest Dreamworks movie, but it doesn't feel like it. The movie is just more fun than the original, I mentioned that I found Shark, Webs, and Piranha to be boring in the first movie, but they were way better here. Not amazing, but I found them a lot funnier. I thought Shark was just more funny. Webbs probably has less lines than she did before, but I just found her to be more important, I guess. I didn't find her as much of a, she just exists. Her character goes from a 5 out of 10 to a 6 out of 10. Piranha's still not very funny because he still mostly has a bunch of fart jokes, but I still did chuckle him a bit more than I did in the first movie. So the side characters aren't amazing, but they are better than they were before. But they were I mentioned that Piranha had some pretty annoying fart jokes, though. Unfortunately, those are all shoved into the climax. Sure, one can say it's good they got them all out of the way in one period, but to do it in the climax, I don't know if that was such a good idea. Still, though, the climax was fantastic. It really felt big and exciting. Almost like a Mission Impossible movie, but in animation. Instead of seeing Tom Cruise hanging on the side of a plane, you're getting to see the bad guys hanging on the side of a rocket ship. I've never seen anything like that in animation before, so it's cool to see it here. And I got to see it on the big screen, no less. Wolf and Snake, who are my 2 favorite characters in the first movie, don't really have big arcs like they did before, but I actually find them more interesting here. Okay, not really Snake, because he's mostly just here for humor now. He doesn't really have a character arc, but to the movie's credit, he was legitimately funny. All the over-the-top scenes with his girlfriend are so weird, but it did genuinely get me to laugh, which is something I cannot say about the first movie. Back to Wolf. I think I liked him a lot more than I did before, in the original. His arc is a lot more subtle, which says something, but I think the way it's portrayed was able to just make me feel the impact of it more. I've seen people say they like the first movie more because the character development was more of a big thing about the bad guys learning to become good guys, but that did work for me. It's not like that's exactly the most original story ever. Sure, there's no such thing as an original idea, but Still, this movie's character arc for Wolf is a lot more unique and something that I just found to be more interesting. It's not about bad guys trying to become good. Instead, it's the follow-up to that, which is something you don't really get to see too often, especially in mainstream movies. It's about ex-cons trying to stay good. Which is a good segue to talk about Diane and the villains, too. Much like with other characters, Diane technically doesn't have as big an arc as she did in the first movie, but I just found her to be more entertaining. Like, I thought the action scene where she fights the villains, that was cool. I liked her dynamic with Wolf more, despite her and Wolf probably having less interactions. I think the whole scene with her being the Crimson Paw getting publicly revealed was a good way to continue her character. Helps keep her character moving instead of just being static. And it made her officially join the group, which is a good decision. Hopefully we can see that in The Bad Guys 3. The villains are also better than the first movies. I said that I liked Marmalade, and he is still in this movie, by the way. I thought he was better than he was before. Like I said before, he's one of the few Dreamworks villains not to die, and I think he's working the story here very well. Because even though he didn't die, I didn't expect him to come back. But the way he turned out to be the actual mastermind behind the story, I thought that was actually a good twist. And it doesn't undermine the actual villains either. Like, the scene where he plays Connect 4 with Diane is hilarious. But speaking of the actual main villain being Kitty Cat, which she could have had a better name, I thought she was a really good villain. The way she reflects Wolf was interesting. I thought she was made for a pretty good threat, too. The whole final action scene where she fights Wolf, where she's telling him her backstory, and about how she's not stealing she and her partners aren't stealing all the world's gold, for the sake of the money or whatever. It's a power move, as she says. Whatever. I have to just know she's an interesting villain. And much like with Marmalade, I like that she doesn't die. I'm not sure if they're going to bring her and her goons back for a Bad Guys 3. I mean, they'll probably bring back her partners, but not her. Speaking of her partners, though, like the pigtail and the eagle girl, I didn't care for them that much. They weren't bad. They had some good jokes, but I didn't really find them that interesting. Still, I really enjoyed The Bad Guys 2. This was a huge improvement over the original in literally every single way. I'm sure we'll be getting a third film since this one, despite having a pretty low box office gross. It did have a very small budget, most Dreamworks movies these days actually get pretty small budgets, unfortunately. Still, this wasn't an amazing movie, but really good. And if The Bad Guys 3, if that does come out, and if it's even better than this one, then great, because I think they can actually do that. If they keep on building on the momentum of these movies, I think they can make something really good next time. Number 19, Shrek. What is there to be said about Shrek that hasn't already been said? It's a classic. It's really funny, it's pretty emotional, it just has a certain feel to it that's very memorable. Like, even ignoring the big cultural impact it had, ignoring all the sequels and spin-offs, just watch it on its own, it has this very distinct vibe that I appreciate, you know? I mean, there's a reason over 90% of mainstream animated movies to this day are still being influenced by it in some way. I do want to say, though, it annoys me when people say that it started the trend of celebrity casting in animated films. That is so wrong. It's a practice going back to Bing Crosby being in a Disney movie in the 40s. Or Phil Harris being in The Jungle Book in 1967. I'm probably the only person watching this video or making it who even knows who Phil Harris is. Or, what about Robin Williams in Aladdin? Tom Hanks and Tim Allen in Toy Story? Celebrity casting wasn't a new thing in animated movies. Okay, tangent aside, I don't really have much to say about this movie, so I'll try to keep it brief. Shrek is a great protagonist. I like how he interacts with each different character, especially Donkey. All the scenes with him and Donkey, funny as they are, they also do manage to build on their characters pretty well. My favorite scene in the movie is the one where Shrek talks about how he's got nothing against the world. It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. Great scene. One of the best in the whole Shrek saga. It's probably the first scene I think of when I think of Shrek. Fiona is a well-written character. Lord Farquaad's a funny villain. And of course, the licensed music is just used super well. This isn't close to being one of my favorite Dreamworks movies, but it's certainly worthy of the praise it's received, I'd say. It's Shrek. 18. Over the Hedge. This movie has The Verminator, which automatically makes it a masterpiece. Jokes aside, I like Over the Hedge quite a bit. I like all the animals, and they all get some good individual scenes. RJ and Vern, the two main characters, have a great dynamic, and I love Bruce Willis and Gary Shandling's performances. It's funny to me that Bruce Willis can go from being an action star in Die Hard and Armageddon to play a talking raccoon. Shows how versatile he is as an actor. You know? The conflict between RJ and Vern is handled really well, and I think the liar revealed trope at the end is also just done super well. And the ending where RJ comes back and gets hugged by the other characters, like, that's actually a pretty touching moment. Like the scene where Vern tells him, you know, if you need help, you could have just asked us. And because that's what families do, we help each other. I like that, you know, it was good. You know, I guess other than the main characters who, about the other animals, you know, like the skunk, the possums, they all have pretty funny lines. They're basically like this movie's equivalent of like Shark, Webs, and Piranha and the bad guys, where they aren't really there to contribute to the plot. They're just there to have some funny moments. They still do have some good plot scenes, though. I mean, the squirrel Hammy, he's actually pretty funny. I liked him. But my favorite part of this movie is the villains. Vincent the bear is pretty menacing and works as a great setup for the plot. And I do like how he comes back in the end. The woman, Gladys, who's the head of the Homeowners Association, it's really over the top and just has some great comedic lines. With this infestation, our property values could go down. But of course, the Verminator is the best character. He does have an associate's degree from Firmtech, after all. I also love the visuals. The animation and detail in the models holds up fairly well. And I like how the humans are always shown from the animals' perspective, making them seem like giants. Is Over the Head some comedic masterpiece? No. But it doesn't mean it's not worthy of being held in high esteem. And I think it's worthy of being put up there in the Dreamworks library. 17. Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. This is by far my least favorite of the trilogy. That said, it's still a very good movie. I like all the new characters, the old characters with plenty of good gags. The villain's funny, and the emotional climax and finale are great stuff. Like I said in my video about the trilogy, it's impressive how they're able to make genuine emotional moments work in a Madagascar movie. Not only do they surprisingly not clash with the tone, but they are touching. I've always found the scene where the animals realize how great it was that they ran away from the zoo because it led to such fun, life-changing experiences for them. I love that scene. I think the stuff with Vitaly the tiger works well, and it has me invested on rewatch too. Like how he has to jump through the impossibly small ring, and he does it. However, this is the least funny Madagascar movie, aside from Penguins, I guess, by a wide margin. The first two are significantly funnier. Like I said, the villain is funny, and I love the penguins when they're around, like always, but since the movie is more focused on telling an actual story, which does work, to be fair, I just can't get into it as much as the previous films. After the amazing car chase in the beginning, Mom, Gloria, and Marty get sidelined, which is a shame. But all that being said, this does have one of the best endings to any DreamWorks movie. No, seriously. The zoo animals joining the circus is a great way for their story to end. I just love the villain's defeat. Her and her goons getting locked on a boat bound for Madagascar, it's a perfect scene. The final rendition of I Like to Move It in the credits is my least favorite version of the song, but I still like it. And I suppose that's the perfect way to summarize my thoughts on this movie. It's not nearly as good as what came before, but it's still really good. It's Madagascar. Last movie I'll talk about in this part 1 that is, Chicken Run. Chicken Run is so much fun. Various one-liners, the incredible stop motion, everything about Chicken Run is enjoyable. Ginger and Rocky are great lead characters, and I love all the side characters, especially Fowler, the old rooster. I love the running gag where he always talks about how he was in the RAF, the Royal Air Force. The tweet, and a joke at the end where he's asked, "Why can't you fly the plane? You said you were in the Royal Air Force." "I was the mascot. They wouldn't let a chicken fly a plane." The villains, the Tweeties, make pretty good villains. Mrs. Tweedy is pretty intimidating, and Mr. Tweedy is hilarious. I love how he keeps talking about how the chickens are organized, I tell ya. And Mrs. Tweedy always tells him that chickens, they don't make plans, they don't scheme, and they are not organized. And then at the end, when the chickens fly away in their plane, Mrs. Tweedy gets crushed. Mr. Tweedy says, "I told you they were organized." There's more I could say, but I'd recommend watching the full review of this movie that I did a year ago. That was probably my best analysis of a DreamWorks movie, honestly. I just love the concept of Chicken Run. The Great Escape with Chickens. It's such a dumb but brilliant concept. And honestly, I like this movie more than The Great Escape, even though that is technically a better movie. So, that's all for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2.